Video 2, Chapter 2 of Quark Living Through Superspace. Maximize Literature and Age of Minimalism by Jack Milton. I just have to go down through my computer to get to Chapter 2. Fictionalizing with what extremes a town, a county, a country, and a world from the perspective of a loner's dream about love. The word of the day seemed to be nucleocosmochronology, and Horace Nallen, preferring instead to be simply known as the poet, moved swiftly away from the idea of astrophysics and mathematics, and all the symbols that plus and minus may have meant, simply because since he was a young boy, he could not understand the difference on a page between greater than and lesser than, believing all his maths teachers, and indeed believing all the maths books should have explained such symbols in a much easier way. Otherwise, there would be complete knowledge of how to bleeding well use a scientific calculator, and all the years that have since passed, and stumped us in, flummoxed us in, been confused to the full hilt as to how to use a scientific calculator, and how many more doppelgangers and lookalikes would there essentially be in the world as soon as you looked up from the equation which nonsensically read U plus W to the times of R equals V multiplied by a strange symbol multiplied by RV over W equals 20 multiplied by WR times XRAW minus R equals T / question mark. In a way in which there had never been a statement from any of the other guys stating how Lum in the sewerest of the cunt ne'er asked about the mine in the nicest of the cunt when the proof was none of them from the old school asked any questions about the well-being of the man and all the thoughts of man hood about McHale and the likes. The poet then made his presence felt. He moved from the mess of fart and sweat with tinges of piss and entered into life by the Garavogue River with the smell and taste of freshness in a day, tickling his skin under a sky that was a blend of blue, white, yellow and grey. He thought of Wilfred Owen in the full knowledge there was war brewing with the slight taste of missile on his tongue after huge explosions further east in the world. A few hours earlier, he heard on the news of Russian missiles attacking the city of Odessa in the Ukraine. It was a wonder a full-blown war wasn't so far away from his reality, with the gait of a loner's poet stroll by sycamore, oak and cherry blossom trees, and the friendliness of ducks and swans. When he thought about war, he wondered about all the ways in which he was happy to know he lived in a neutral state. He wondered, however, how long Ireland would remain constitutionally neutral. For the most part he kept his head to the ground, keeping one eye on the pace he walked at, believing his walk was at a snail's pace, though he was also thinking about deep poetry to write about. He was remembering in his mind about the harder, who was just like everyone else, who paid close attention to him with all the thinking of the harder Killian O'Shea motoring as such. Horace Nallen is a serial killer, serial killer, serial killer, serial killer, serial killer. Just because O'Shea had studied to move 7 over a dozen times. The poet responded to the trigger of O'Shea with his own thoughts on the harder, and decided he would write about a typical garrison town man trying to Irishanize the town with no British anything despite the conch. The poet wrote as a study in his notebook for a fiction, Irish style. The yeah man. Cool. That was the word in the street in terms of a Ballia shop, yet there wasn't an Irish language word uttered in a meeting of two chieftains who both looked at the colour of dark granite on the river as a reflection of the local cathedral. The meeting took place decades after the worst Gaelic language teacher in Ireland hardly cared an ounce about a student's willingness to learn Irish grammar, when the majority of students hardly learned English grammar. And wasn't it gas to get a reaction from another chieftain to ask a Sinn Féin politician on the street near the Old Bomb, why is Glasgow Celtic FC so important to soccer supporting Irish Republicans when Glasgow Celtic doesn't even have a hurling team or a Gaelic football team playing against Antrim, Armagh, Derry, Down Tyrone, Fermanagh, Donegal, Monaghan and Cavan in the GEA Ulster Championships? I don't think he could answer. The Sinn Féin politician mumbled, "Soccer is a universal sport loved by billions," and hardly debated one more word with the chieftain known as Ethan Gill. And years to come, Ethan wondered, would he be a Scot around Irish learning Gaelic Irish? He remembered a Sly King in a classroom in his teenage years, when the worst Gaelic language teacher in Ireland hardly cared an ounce about his students' willingness to learn Irish grammar, when the majority of the students hardly learned English grammar. And I never read Peg. Even so, he clearly remembered bits of Martin O'Geron and the idea he had to his own self about on sale na Shoda, and what there is to wonder about the sale of a Gael and a Gael about sale. Cool. In another moment, the idea of civil war seemed to be on the cards as Ethan wondered about the town he lived in and the remembrance of World War I. He remembered about a series of headbutts he gave to a young man for reasons he could never understand. When he realised he could be a violent man, he understood in the present years there were new versions of William Owen type artists digging in trenches by Dragon's Teeth by the Russian-Ukraine border. They were all probably pleasant men, and when he thought about them, his curiosity was about all his wonderment about how such a war affected Ireland. He didn't give an answer to either himself or anybody else. Instead, his focus was on something different. It was a style of traditionalism. One day in Europe, I was presented with a Thursday. There were huge people everywhere to be seen in the town, and described them all as giants. I believed they were the origins of an East European lesson. Ireland, you do everything else but exercise. We didn't think so. We were used to the Irish dancing hall and the stage with dancers in traditional costumes with the best hairstyles kicking out reels and jigs with straight backs and hands by the side. The fiddler, the accordion player, the tin whistler, the pianist and the guitarist were in the front row, playing the tunes. There were special seats for the adjudicators who would judge the dance. Such a life was loved by all of us until we realised the silver smoke of cigarettes had been killing us all in the hall. Mother was pulling hard on cigarettes as her sons and daughters danced for the trophy and the plaque. Yes, it was Ireland, and it was simply a fact of Ireland in many people's eyes and nothing else but Ireland. In other people's opinion, such as mine, it was a case of Ireland was very much part of Europe, with hardly an expectation for a Japanese man or woman to learn Irish traditional music. Yes, it was world and multiculturalism and all the wonder of the world if by any chance multiculturalism could really work. Sometimes the egg sandwiches with the mayonnaise and the spring onion with garnish of parsley sprinkled over the bread, served with a cup of tea, wasn't enough. Years later, when we would have spent all our money on hashish and smoked hashish in a park or down by the river or under the shadow of the cathedral bells, when we really wanted to find a woman to dance and kiss for a slow dance, We decided we'd go to the nightclub after a whole pile of giggling about the story of Arsenio O'Boyle falling to the earth in a raindrop after being evaporated to the clouds. Before we focused our attention on the most beautiful woman in the nightclub, the rest of the town had been drinking in designer bars, and many were buzzing on E or cocaine. We wouldn't have as much money as the others to get fucked off our face. All the people we knew were sons and daughters of rich families, but fucked off our face we would get nonetheless. We would steal pints of lager, beer, and stout behind the backs of those who were more than high. We never knew what we were drinking, but we get fucked off our face nonetheless. Decades later, in adult years, a man learned about the word vicissitude and realised the word didn't necessarily mean strength, though in truth it was very much a strong word. The same day, he learned about the word vestibule and realised it didn't necessarily have anything to do with the collection of benediction ornaments, even though he had visions of a monstrance, the terrible with the Jerusalem incense and charcoal, the humoral veil, as well as the Eucharistic host and the altar bells. There was so much to learn regarding the letter V. He would later focus all his attention on why there were no more victuallers in his town anymore. The last time he had been in a victualler, he was told he needed to buy more than the full head of a pig if he really wanted to eat pig's cheek casserole for dinner. He stepped forward. He presented his name as Jerome Marshall. When I was playing a Jane's Addiction style song on a stage at a concert in Pisa, on the same day I wondered how strange the Leaning Tower of Pisa still hadn't fallen, and the whole expectation I had the Leaning Tower of Pisa would fall as soon as I took a photograph of the Leaning Tower of Pisa. In order to prove I was there when the Leaning Tower of Pisa fell to the ground, in order to prove my existence, in order to know I am still here, for I know, as a matter of fact, the poet Horace Nallen wanted to write a rock song for a rock band. The poet made his way back to life in the most Dadaist way. The admittance was he did have a rock song he wished a rock guitarist would put to music. This is a song he wrote, which he titled Song Again. Song again. With tender kisses, I cherish your wishes. As we dance to the song, through every last thought you will know the reason why I cry for your love during the longest days, when I would gaze at your beauty in the big, big city, when you were wearing yellow, when everything was mellow. Oh woman, I dream of long nights together with all the sights of my feast for your love, when I was like the dove of styles through all the miles of good life storms. Oh my love, kiss me deeply on the lips, with all the shakes of a dance of the best known romance, understood as a Paris call, to know the shawl I wear is known through every day at noon, when there are thoughts about the sun and the moon, and the sky and the sea. Oh my love, but you make me so happy. The poet smiled. The song was horrendous. But the song wasn't what life was about. It wasn't like the music he listened to. He wasn't pop ballads and he wasn't so mushy. Yet he wondered, how could he talk to the roughest people in the world? How could he reach out to the roughest people in the world? One had to understand. One had to understand. And yet, nobody needed to understand. And yet they did. Later, when he thought life through in so much as he knew a certain amount of reality, he released a sigh for all to know. He released a sigh. There are so many in this life who are streetwise. Being cocooned as Memory's boy, he wondered if he had played around the corner. His face would have been a bit more sharp. There would be less of the baby face, and his accent would have been more Bronx. There were people shouting. "Give it up," they roared. He encouraged them to read the words in Yates' grave and tried to understand. He said no more. He didn't even think. End of chapter 2. Of video 2 of Quark living in superspace. Isn't that the title of it? Quark living through superspace. Yeah. So that's the end of chapter 2, video 2. I hope you're liking it so far.